Let's make a start. Okay. Welcome today to our webinar on the future of test automation. I'd like to welcome our two key speakers, Tara Selexton from QArea, who is the head of AQA there with 10 plus years experience as an AQA specialist. We also have James Vent, who is VP of Solution Engineering at Virtuoso, works with customers there in a range of industries and has worked in SaaS organizations for the last 15 years before joining Virtuoso in 2021. Myself, my name is Bruce Mason. I'm the delivery director here, having worked in IT for 30 plus years in a variety of different roles, working globally in Europe, Middle East, Asia, and US, and of course the UK. Okay, let's make a start on one of our first topics. Okay, I want to start off with what to look for when sourcing an AQA Tools provider in the market. There are two key areas to focus on in this particular part, specifically key people from a client that should be looking at, ideally CFO, CIO, and CTO. The CFO should be in charge and looking after the costs of potential tools so that they stay within budget, as well as looking at, obviously, the financial benefits that would come as a result of bringing it to you. A CIO should be looking at how it will benefit the internal and external users of the system, as well as the efficiency savings, for example, quality, people, time, as examples. And then, of course, there's the CTO. Who needs to look at how any tool will integrate with their existing systems to ensure that it will comply with any constraints, either internally or regulatory. This could include things like security, data protection, or audit processes from regulators as well. So these are key things that need to be considered by a business before they start looking at engaging with an AQA tools provider. When they start to engage with an AQA tools provider, given that all of these people are C-level and extremely busy, and at the same time, they also may have conflicting interests, it may be a prudent exercise for them to appoint an independent person to manage this engagement on their behalf and look at the corresponding tools. However, someone like the CTO can't be circumvented because they still have to perform that sanity check on the constraints, both internal and regulatory, to ensure that they are going to meet what is needed to stay safe for their organization and their people. With regards to AQA Tools, as we will find out as we go through this webinar, there's no one size fits all within the market, and each of them have their pros, maybe some cons, and as such, a customer needs to consider that when looking for their associated partners. So that's my take on that. James, maybe you've got some additional thoughts based on your experience?
Yeah, no, Bruce, I mean, you raised some really interesting points here because, you know, you look at those personas you've called out and, I mean, let's face it, they operate with different interests and in different areas. And also, let's face it, when we're talking about, you know, AQA, when we're talking about testing, it's quite a technical topic. And it's not necessarily, I mean, even if we talk within there, when we talk about tools providers, you have different tools, not just maybe, you know, if we're talking functional testing, there's obviously a spread of tools which each may have their own, you know, focal and sort of better placed. Yet you've also got different types of testing. So you've got unit testing or performance testing or visual testing. And you think for a CFO, even to a CIO to some extent, for them to navigate that and understand exactly what am I looking at, it can be quite difficult. But then, as you say, because those types of people, they're C-level, they are going to be very busy. They will then likely delegate to other people to go and say, now go and, you know, actually perform the assessments or go and find me lists. And yet when they do that delegation, you know, the sense of the cohesiveness between them, that shared mission, you know, people might, you know, get a little sort of get the blinkers on and just look at, I'm just focusing on the technical part. I'm just focusing on the financial part. So I think you're absolutely right. Laying the groundwork where everybody understands the strategy, everybody understands why we're doing something and what the parameters are, I think is really, really important. Otherwise, it's a rush to say, let's just look at tools. Yeah.
Which, yeah, isn't potentially going to get a business benefit or achieve corresponding goals for an organization. Okay, good thoughts. Taras, is there anything else that you'd like to bring in there with your experience as part of engagements?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the business side is very important, right? So the finances and all that. But since this is a tool that's going to be used by engineers for actually performing some test automation and building the strategy and creating the processes, I think it's really important to take your context into view and find a tool that's use your context, right? So you can do front-end testing, you can do performance testing, you can do back-end testing, right? And there are several tool providers that can help you with that. And as you mentioned, some tools have, all the tools have some pros and cons, right? So you need to pick a tool that gets you like the best efficiency there is, right? So if, let's say, your context is more focused on front-end web UI, you should definitely get the tool that that helps you deliver, the efficiency and makes things better overall, right? And basically add value to your QA processes.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. That's very good. I think we'll close that one off there and say no tool is going to provide 100% of what an organization needs. You will need to wrap that around with process and maybe make some compromises as part of that to ensure that you get the most out of the tool from a benefit perspective, but at the same time, still ensuring continuity of service and what you need to do on a day-to-day. So I think it's worthwhile mentioning. Okay, so let's move on with another topic. What kind of trends are we seeing within the corresponding market? For this, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Taras. Perhaps you can talk about introducing and emerging new trends within AQA Tools.
Right. So we're all are familiar with the traditional way of doing test automation, right? So we're talking test automation for this one. There's like a coding approach, right? So we had these tools for creating some kind of test frameworks or doing the way in the coding way for a long time now, right? So we started with some record and playback stuff, and we got tools that got better with time, right? So if we're talking about the front end and UI, we've got the Selenium IDE, we've got the Selenium RC, then WebDriver, and so on, right? So now we have this kind of new kid on the block. Well, not that new, right? But this is this hype stuff that's called AI, right? And from my perspective, it looks like it's here. It's going to stay, right? So definitely, we as professionals, as test automation engineers, we are kind of forced to not ignore this one, right? So looks like the industry, the landscape is reshaping. And this emergence of this new approach and new tool based on AI technologies is gonna make a lot of fuss, and it's making already, right? So this is in progress, and this definitely is going to require from the test automation engineers, from QA engineers, to change the approach that they currently have, to change their way of thinking about creating the test automation or QA processes and basically doing all of those activities related to ensuring some quality. So I think it's really important for everyone especially for those guys who are responsible for for the leading roles or for creating some strategies or doing the overall stuff to not miss this trend, right? So it's all about if we talk about this in general, this new stuff is all about efficiency and making things faster, making things better, and making things more efficient. And so let's say if we have the AI tools now, this is one of the of the capabilities of the AI tools is faster creation of test scripts, right? And this speeds up the whole chain. So this is like you're getting more efficient in doing the work, and you have the time to do some more important work as well, right? And focus on more things that maybe were ignored with the previous approach. And from my perspective, I see that this thing was also happening, let's say, in IT, like some time ago with programming languages. We had like really low-level programming languages, and then we got to some high-level programming languages.
Yeah.
So basically, it was the same process, right? So you created some software, you solved some business issues, but the tooling improved. So now you didn't have to know the details of your hardware, because there was an abstraction layer between the hardware and you, right? And you were able to do things in a faster way. And I think this is exactly what's happening with this automation tooling and AI stuff right now. So you're already able to do things faster. Like you don't need to know coding, like, because you can use the AI tool that helps you create your test cases into test scripts. And this looks like a natural progression for me. So there's definitely there is some benefit from that, right? I don't believe that in the near future we're going to end up with 100% of test automation guys doing this, like no coding, no code, or low code solutions. But I think it's like it shouldn't be ignored by the test automation guys for sure, because it's basically helps you add more value in a more faster way.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I'd say AI was like a buzzword over the last couple of years, and everybody's been jumping on board, I'd say, with regards to that. Incorporating AI into AQA Tools is obviously a logical next step, which we've seen. And as I say, over the last 12 to 18 months, it's kind of gradually stepped up. As you said, it's evolved and grown. And I think that's going to happen and continue to do so. Will it ever replace, as a human being? Who knows? But I think logically, as I say, if you think back from a statistics-based perspective, being an ex-PM myself, I always go on stats of 80-20 or 60-40. I think there will always be that need to have that last piece being done by a human, because the AI isn't going to get all the way there, at least maybe not necessarily in our lifetimes, but let's see how that goes. Only the future can tell that. James, what are your thoughts on this? I'm sure, as I say, as part of your company, you've definitely got some thoughts on this area.
We do, and actually, considering I work for an AI test automation platform, I'm happy to say that we're not going to cover everything, and we will still recommend. If somebody's got a legacy platform, we don't touch that. So we'll say, if you're using a Selenium framework and that will run for you, keep it. Because it's sort of like horses for courses type of thing. But I think actually, Taras, you mentioned something around programming languages, how you go from low level, but then they become abstracted. And that's exactly what you see in the evolution of test automation, is this levels of abstraction, taking you away from the code. Although I will say that, there's no such thing as codeless or no code. Everything in some sense is a code. So if you talk of codeless tools, I will also say that AI didn't happen in the last 2 years. Generative AI came to the fore, but branches of AI, machine learning, computer vision, predictive analytics, they've been around for ages. We've been incorporating ML into the platform since 2017. But then you've also got that, I think, Bruce, you sort of mentioned, those which incorporate into and those which bolt onto the side. Yes. For instance, we now have things like Playwright, where I can bolt Copilot onto the side of it. And so what everyone's trying to figure out at the moment is, nobody's come up with a perfect proposition of how to make AI autonomous. And I don't believe, like you, it's not going to. I saw that something saying that Gen AI at the moment can't even tell you how many R's there are in strawberry, let alone write a complex test. So I agree also that however far AI goes, people are always going to be involved in that. But what is going to be seen actually is, what's the evolution? How is it a co-pilot approach? Is it assistive? And is it Gen AI, or is it actually people talk about ML? Computer vision, I think, will come in more and more in terms of visual inspections. But I think, again, going back sort of to our first topic there, the key thing is it's not going to be suddenly this replaces that, this and not that. It's nothing will cover everything. And I think actually one point I just wanted to make back on that, to the first question of sourcing an AQA tools provider, is make sure you ask them, what don't you do? Yes. What would you recommend we did for the parts we don't have? Because anybody who can't answer that question probably either doesn't know or is, not
it's a very good
to sort
point.
of uncover that. Yeah.
Yeah, very good point indeed. Very good. Okay. I'd just like to pause there and say, mention that if anybody's got any questions whilst they are listening as part of this, if they could please write them down in the chat so that we can continue the webinar on as we go, talking through the topic. If we get a chance at the end, we will obviously cover off the questions as best we can, or alternatively, we will most definitely follow up on these when we post the video and follow up with the questions with responses from our key speakers today. Okay, thank you. In that case, let's move on. Let's talk about now potential recent breakthroughs within the market for AQA-based tools. I think let's have a change around. Let's start with you, James, on this one. Yeah. What are your thoughts, and where do you? What have we seen recently, and where is potentially going? Yeah.
So I think, you know, what we're seeing firstly with the market, which is driving those breakthroughs, people are saying more and more, what can AI do for me? How can it drive my testing and make that my QA and make it more efficient and more valuable and scalable? And so, of course, most of the recent breakthroughs have been, what does AI do? I mean, for example, Virtuoso, and I will talk about other platforms as well. We've been using machine learning within the branch of AI to be able to do things like identify elements without you needing to go and find selectors or build keywords. So to the point you made, Taras, around building tests really quickly, I have to write them, but I don't have to go and find elements. I'm using natural language and using AI to go and locate those. But similarly, people may have heard the term self-healing, where again, we're using machine learning in that case to go and heal the elements where there are dynamic changes. I mean, that's something that's, you know, we've had for quite a number of years, and other providers are starting to sort of look in similar areas. What we're now seeing, though, and what we're playing around with is now, what can you do with generative AI? And if I talk about sort of what I see in the market, as well as a few things we're trying, so I am seeing some more exploratory type tools where people are taking Gen AI as a concept and saying, can I put in a URL without doing anything and have it determine some test cases for me? I think that itself is very exploratory at the moment in terms of what it produces as outputs. What we are playing around with Gen AI is, and I know a number of other sort of providers are looking at this, is can I feed in requirements or user stories and have generative AI convert those into test cases in whatever the structure the platform uses? We're sort of we're in the sort of an alpha stage of that, where we're starting to see the answer is you can get about 80% of the way there just by feeding in requirements. Although there's a caveat that, you know, the outputs are only as good as the inputs to some extent. Yeah. And I think what we are going to continue to see are areas, for instance, you know, we think about creating tests, but then what about test data? So we're again starting to play around with what can you do with generative AI to create test data that will be relevant to the test. That's a massive issue. Doing things like, for instance, be able to create functions that you can use in your tests. You know, for example, we allow you to create custom natural language commands with JavaScript. If you don't know JavaScript, you have a code generator to do that for you. But then one area of testing I don't think is really spoken about enough in terms of what tooling can do and AI, and what we're starting to see breakthrough with us, but others, is being able to take, let's say, a test output and start to interpret that for you and give you suggestions. If it broke, why was that? And actually, you know, then you could start thinking, where can you go with that? Can you start having with suggestions to automatically heal your code? You know, we don't have that, but could that be where this goes? So I think, you know, there are breakthroughs happening, as well as we see things like, again, I mentioned Copilot with Playwright. You see other test automation tools sort of bolting onto the side to start saying, actually, can AI take information, and whether it's provide information about tests, test results, you know, suggest coverage, for example. Those are things that are happening now, and I think over the coming years will only get stronger. Yeah.
I think touching on that self-healing point a little bit, at the moment, I see that potentially evolving over time, where effectively, depending on patterns that the AI could effectively recognize, you constantly move in this particular direction. I can self-heal and save you that time because I recognize that you're constantly doing that. Yeah. So I think that's kind of alluding to where potentially that can go. Again, is there that need for that constant verification from a human, though, to effectively say, don't 100% do that because I'm just concerned you may not get it right. I guess that's kind of a suck it and see type thing down the line, where effectively we can see, whereas if you're getting 99.9 statistics where it's self-healing and you go, yeah, I'm constantly just having to push the button and say, yeah, that's all good, then you can probably turn around and say, just do it. Yeah. But that's a long way off for validation, specifically where systems are regulatory and you have to be 100% sure that it's going to comply. Yeah, but that's good thoughts. Taras, any additional thoughts on your side from that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say these are like the breakthrough, right? But what we've seen during the past maybe like one on a half year is a constant evolutional like iterations, right, of improving things. So let's say if you want to create a test script with AI tools right now, it's very similar to just plain English language, right? So it's natural processing language. So now it got better because like earlier you would still do some kind of, not natural English, right? But now you can basically just write, in plain English sentence and the tool will create it for you. That's a great thing, right? Regarding self-healing, we've also seen like probably two types of self-healing right now. So the one is mostly concerned, as you, James, mentioned, with locators and elements and IDs and all that stuff. Basically, if something changes inside the HTML document, it can be fixed right by the AI. The other type of self-healing that we can see is emerging in current tools right now is basically not just connected to IDs or elements, but to the whole layout. Let's say we have a page, right? A web UI page, and the layout of that page changed. So we have some elements that got replaced by some other elements, or just got some different positions on the page. And the current iteration of AI tools can also do that. So it's not 100%, like correct still, but it got better, and you still got this possibility right now. That's really great. Then we can also see another trend where you can use basically AI for finding out some patterns in application behavior shifts or changes that you can also analyze some performance data of your system under test or your application, and the AI can pinpoint some kind of deviations around that. That's still also not like the 100% accuracy and 100% of efficiency, but we didn't have that earlier, right? So this is also kind of the new stuff. It's progressing right now. Also, I think that there's more focus on some kind of like visual testing, right? It was previously also there, but now I think pretty much every AI tool has that, and also some service providers that were initially not AI based, like BrotherStack or Sauce Labs, also have some kind of tool that help you with dealing this kind of problems that arise when you do some kind of visual testing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great time to be a test automation engineer at this point with all the AI stuff happening around.
Interesting changes coming through. Yeah, I just want to pick up on, I say, one point there. Effectively, when we obviously started looking at this and looking at all the providers on the market about 18 months to 2 years ago, and we started obviously looking at all of these services that are there, we found that within the first kind of 6 to 8 months, there was a huge jump in technology, and effectively the efficiency of the tools would just kind of like leapt. But effectively in the last kind of like 6 months, yes, it's kind of moved in that general direction, but it's slowed an awful lot. And I see that a lot of the competitors are slowly catching up with the guys that effectively got those big efficiency gains to try and close that corresponding gap, although they're still moving forward. So I think what we're likely to see maybe over the next 2, 3, 4 years is not huge jumps, but more, again, slow, gradual nibbles in the market on the efficiency to effectively see that just kind of like going up more and more slowly rather than huge jumps, unless someone comes in with a huge killer feature, of course, which is going to obviously just take the market by storm. But we will have to see with regards to that, where that comes from and what comes out. But at the moment, I see more of a trend. It's just going to nibble and get slower, but as they provide that added additional efficiency. Okay, next topic. We've already started to try and touch on this a little bit more as part of this conversation we just had, but AI and test automation, how can AI really utilize those patterns to effectively kind of help and assist human testers? Taras, perhaps you want to drive back in on this one again a little bit. Yeah.
Sure. So there are multiple points that we can see an AI-based tool as an advantage when using with the test automation, right? So first of all, you got like everything in one place. So there's also like some kind of a dashboard or some kind of system where you basically operate and where you create the test cases, where you run those, just the scripts when you run those, you can see the results and analyze them, right? So when we think about it in the traditional way, you have to build it. You have to get them different parts, different software, and integrate it into one thing, right? So you have to build the framework. You have to integrate it with some kind of CI tool. You have to add some reporting. You have to do all that stuff, right? So it's kind of constructor. You build it. Here we have everything in one place, right? You can create test cases with plain English. You can convert your test cases. So well, the main feature, I think, in my humble opinion, is the low-code, no-code approach, right? So test automations test automation projects are development projects, right? And you need the right people to do that. So if you want the automation to be healthy, if you want it to be efficient, you need the right guys for the job, right? So you need some people with technical knowledge. When we're talking about the AI tool in test automation, you basically need the people who are familiar with the domain of testing and quality assurance, but they don't need to have this, technical skill in coding, which is great because now, again, this is making things easier. So you can create an automated script that will have all those attributes of an automated script. So it can be rerun and can be, scaled and can be reused and all that stuff. But you don't need to know a programming language, which is a great benefit. Like if you're thinking about this on a management level, it's easier to get resources, people to do that. So it makes things easier, right? It makes things more efficient because creating a test script in this kind of way is simply faster. So it's faster and it's simpler, right? Then you have the features that we already mentioned to some extent. Self-healing is a great stuff. Also, it's not the biggest issue in test automation, like from my experience. I mean, the change of locators or change of elements, right? But it's a nice thing to have because you're not going to spend that time on just simply doing stupid updates. The AI is going to handle that for you, right? So all this contributes to just better efficiency when you are creating a test script and you are creating some kind of test automation approach, right? Then we have all those things like analyzing of test runs, which again is not like on the higher level right now. It's still limited, but it also is a great help when you're thinking about test automation. Stuff like test data. Again, was mentioned by Jem. So this is an issue that you have to take care of with a traditional approach. So you need, for some systems, you need a lot of test data. It has to have some features, like it has to be random, it has to be unique, it has to be somewhat similar to what you have in your production system. So again, Gen AI in this case can help you deal with that. So that is a great stuff, right? A great advantage of that. So I'd say in general, if you're using AI tools, within the correct context and with the right approach and right strategy, you're gonna have value added. You're gonna make things faster and more efficient. But again, you need to be really cautious here because you need to find this right balance between offloading things to an AI tool, right, and still doing some things that need to be done by a human engineer.
Okay, that's an interesting point. I think it's worth saying that obviously any resources that you may bring in that are maybe business based, effectively are still going to have a slightly longer lead time than if you bring in like an existing tester onto a system, because they've still got that learning curve to go through. Okay, so what constitutes a good test case, albeit that I can record it, so or as they define it in human language. So there's still kind of like that little bit of longevity, but most tools are relatively simple these days to learn quickly because that's their design. So it's worthwhile at least mentioning that for people to at least be aware of, that there is obviously a lead time, but once you get used to the tools, they are relatively simple to obviously operate. Yeah, take 4. Okay. James, any additional thoughts in this particular area?
Yeah, and there is, because one area that actually I focus on a lot. I mean, both Bruce and Taras, we talk a lot about the testing tools, the testing platforms. Are they easy to use? How do they work? But actually, a lot of the focus in the role I have is actually looking at the applications they're testing. In our world, we talk about browser applications, because that's the sphere we work with. And I like to joke that there's really no such thing as web standards. You look between multiple applications and find a drop down, it's not going to be the same in any of those applications, or unlikely to be. And but then also you've got things like understanding, how does the workflow even work? Because let's face it, they've probably been bolted together over time, people putting fields in here and there. Of course, front end may be better designed than that, but back end systems, they're kind of put together by necessity over time, and therefore to understand the workflow, but also to understand what are all the values of data I need to be able to run a scenario through those systems. That's the bit that actually has got nothing to do with the test automation. That's the setup. You've got to understand all that stuff before you can even get going. And so to that end, when we talk about sort of what AI does, it certainly makes test automation platforms more accessible. It makes it easier to create. It reduces the lead time to get me started on that platform. And with things like self-healing, looking at test maintenance burden, I mean, it only goes so far today, but certainly they help. But then you think about AI and you say, AI is simply not an oracle. AI does not know, for instance, what is the workflow? What is it looks at the screen and says, well, that's a drop down. And, it may not understand. Actually, you can't interact using that platform's method with that drop down because it's actually not a drop down. And so in that case, what, you've really got to consider actually in a perfect world. And actually, I mean, you could imagine 20 years from now, you use AI to write all the code of all applications that become standardized. And actually, a lot of the problems people face in test automation, which is handling the great variety in applications, maybe that levels everything out and makes it just super simple. But right now, I think, you've got to consider, yes, AI can help us a lot, largely with lead time, largely with efficiency, largely with cutting down or rather increasing productivity. However, there's an awful lot of stuff that goes around the periphery that needs a lot of planning, a lot of management, and that's where your QA or your QE really comes into the fore. Yeah.
I think that comes back to some of the first points that we're touching on, that effectively you're never going to get everything completely progressed by any tool. And you're always going to need to wrap around that with human beings or even process to ensure that you've got obviously that, which again comes back to that overall efficiency that management, when they engage with a partner for an AQA-based tool, need to consider all of that to put together either a project or a program to integrate it into the system so that they get that efficiency trade-off. They see where they get the wins and they see where they get the losses, but they go forward with more positive gains than obviously negative. Yeah. Okay, that's good thoughts. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Okay, let's move on to real-world impact of our testing workflows. Taras, please take us through on this one and your thoughts with regards to, I say, where we are now.
Yeah, I think so. The way things are with AI tools right now, they are already ready for being used, for real test automation, and that's the case, right? So there's a lot of case studies with the companies that have done that. So basically, it's just all the things that we talked about already. So you need to change your approach. So we need to be able to integrate the AI tool into your current QA processes, right? So you need to rethink the way you think about test automation being simply, this process of converting test cases into a test script, right? So because if you're going to be the operator of AI tool, right, you're going to be create a test case. You need to be aware of the context and of all the quality related issues around that. Yeah, you basically have to combine all those features that an AI tool can give you in order to have the higher productivity and the faster deliverable of things, right? So creating test scripts, so doing some kind of test data generation, maybe test case optimizations, and stuff like defects predictions as well, right? So you can offload that to an AI tool, freeing the resources for doing some exploratory testing or focusing more on improving gaps in existing QA processes. Also, in general, this will help you speed up, this create a faster feedback loop from your test automation and your QA processes, which also helps speed up things between the development and QA processes as well. So in general, you're going to have the great impact on overall QA processes if you incorporate the AI-driven tools in the right manner and in a correct context.
Okay. Let's extend that maybe a little. We talked about AI technology utilizing ChatGPT to effectively go out and ask questions and effectively maybe create data pools to effectively draw in as part of obviously your testing. I guess the effectively a good real world example of that might be for a banking based domain, that effectively you could pull in all of the banks in the UK as a data pool into a corresponding system that effectively you could obviously test against all of those. Whilst that's obviously 100% saturation with regards to obviously a test, for a manual tester to do something like that would take days, weeks, months. But for an AI system to effectively just go and give it to me, create this as a data pool to obviously use, it's maybe not necessarily instantaneous, but it's near enough there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can use the AI tool to create a test data that is the closest thing possible to some real data. And especially in domains like like banking or finances or education can have some benefits, because as we mentioned it before, getting real data, generating real data for testing or almost like is always a challenge for test automation if we're talking about some large systems under test.
I guess as well with the move to more open banking, as we see that in the UK and across Europe, where everything becomes more standardized. Again, albeit obviously it's still all regulated and you have to comply with those corresponding regulations. But I guess it makes it easier for AI-based tools and AQA-based tools, because if the changes are small from a regulatory-based perspective, then effectively there's less to potentially self-heal from integration-based perspectives. Is that more logically the case, do you think? Guys, your thoughts on that one? Sorry to throw in curveballs. Yeah.
sorry, Bruce. I thought you were asking Taras. No, I think you're highlighting a good point there, Bruce, which is I think AI is particularly useful for those point solutions, and I think can really help on those. I mean, our platform wasn't really for that, but I do know other platforms and other solutions are more fixed on a job, if you like, Whether it's, there are some great AI platforms out there right now that can take, let's say, a set of production data and create synthetic data really quickly for you to be able to test against. Where, to ask somebody to do that, to be able to scrub it, to be able to, but not just scrub it, but actually create completely sort of synthetic data, that's a massive task. There are some AI tools which, to some extent can go in and can start actually suggesting coverage across your application. Building user stories off the back of it to say, what should you be testing? It's not going to build the test, but it starts to actually indicate what level of coverage and prioritizations. So I think AI as a point solution, particularly generative AI, that's really happening right now. I mean, for our side, if we talk then more, if we talk at the bigger, the broader testing as a whole, the end-to-end process from the build, the run, the report on, the maintenance, that cycle, AI really is feeding in to be able to make it. It's really about, it comes down basically like any automation, AI or not, it comes down to your speed and time, the cost, the quality scale up, and the risk mitigation. Those factors which link right back to that very first point we made around get the CFO, CIO, and CTO to agree. That's really why you're doing this.
Yes.
Which really then, when we're talking about real world impact for us, what we're finding people taking our platform, particularly in the enterprise space, testing business systems, particularly in a world where actually you have to say it's not just what AI is doing, it's, why is there even a problem anyway? And it's because actually what's happened in the world of development has got faster. Development has become to a degree easier. Testing has to keep up. And I think what AI is certainly contributing to is saying, how can you help testing keep up rather than a traditional bottleneck? So I think, to the points you made, Bruce, there are absolutely point solutions. And then there's the broader one, which are, how does it make it easier for a person, a tester, make their job easier to transition from being, let's say, a manual tester or from using a framework, which in themselves are very powerful and very very flexible, but really when you come down to that speed factor, they're not really enabling. So AI's, that's the real world impact it's having it for the broader picture. It's the speed and the efficiency and the scaling up.
Given talking about, say, how it would impact on the testers themselves, and we also just touched a little bit on the business and the integration with regards to them, it will be good to consider how the AI could actually help effectively CTOs, CFOs, or even CFOs, CIOs to effectively make decisions. So effectively, if we're doing a huge release, what kind of information could that AI provide to the people that need to make the decisions? Do we have to go live with this release? Is it just so fundamental? What kind of impacts would be? What kind of risk assessments could we have? And effectively provide that information to them to be in a position whereby they can obviously make logical decisions with information without someone having to obviously just go and get reams of data to assess that prior to a corresponding release. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I'll answer that because, and I'm sure we're not the only platform to see this, but you can show the most amazing capabilities and it's like, wow, look at how much it helps you create a test, runs them, it helps you maintain them. The one thing everybody asks on, and actually this is testing in my perspective, is what does the output of the test mean? How can I interpret that? Because let's face it, if I'm a CFO, CTO, probably more a CTO, CIO.
CTO and CIO, yeah.
Frankly, I don't really care how you did it, as long as you did it on time. I don't really care what the buttons were. I care what came out of it. And there is that kind of, you also see there's a tendency, and I don't think anyone's to blame for this, is there's a tendency to say, actually, I'm trying in automation, I try to make all my tests go green. If it breaks, it must be the automation. And what you lose is this ability for everybody to actually translate, because if you think through the various personas, the purpose of testing, the purpose of quality itself becomes abstracted from the design through the build, through the requirement, through the operation. And so actually, if people are sitting there saying, I'm not quite sure what I'm testing, I've been told it's this, but I don't know that because I don't use it. is this green or is it red? And if it's red, is that critical? So that interpretation, I agree with you. If you can start to roll that up and say, what does this mean? Especially if I'm a CTO and I say, I've got to press that button and I do not want in the middle of the night to get a call saying it's down and business has stopped.
Yes.
But I need to be sure. I think certainly the reporting and interpretation side, AI, or whether it's analytics,
Yes.
I think that's an area that's really gonna come up quite strongly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to be key, obviously, for decision makers, because as we talked about, as I said, you can push all the tests through and they can all show green. But at the end of the day, you need to have the confidence to be in a position to promote that code to live, to effectively say, yes, I can make decisions based on the information. For example, okay, we've tested 10% manually and 90% say by automation as part of regression-based suites. Okay, do we really have 100% coverage, guys? Yeah, or where are we missing some of these gaps? Yeah, okay, and what kind of risks have I got as an output from that, so that the decisions are made in the right way? We need to feed the enablers to actually be in a position to make those key decisions. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
So when we look a little bit back in history, we already have I try to fix this issue, right? So everyone who's involved can be confident. Is this enough? Is this coverage or this 100 green tests out of 120 enough? We have the the BDD approach with the Gherkin stuff. So this is exactly about that, right? So everyone understands what's happening from the beginning of the chain through the tech people into the business people, right? Into the product owners. But still, I think what AI will be capable of doing, like in the near future, is giving like a go or no go, right? So based on what kind of test results we have, what kind of features are we releasing? So okay, so if this fails, this is not critical. We can still go with the deployment, with release, and so on. I would really like to see that in AI tools, because that would be a great help. So that would be exactly the link that's missing. So everyone can be on the same page. What's happening in scope of quality, in scope of general software process.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Okay. Let's move on. Next topic. Okay. How can QAs and their teams start thinking about AI in their workplace now? Obviously, if an organization isn't necessarily going to go out and find an AQA-based tool, what can those QAs do now to start thinking about that and kind of introduce it maybe within their environment, organically? Taras, what are your thoughts on this one, and how can they go about that?
I think, well, first of all, it's always a great place if you somehow build this kind of culture within your team that enforces people to look into some interesting and new stuff, right? So constantly learn something new and watch out for some new tools on the market. I mean, it's from my perspective, this is like a very important part of an IT job. So you need to know what's happening, right? You need to be familiar with the trends. You need to know what kind of new tools are there and what kind of changes are happening, right? So I think this is really important to have this kind of philosophy of constant learning and constant finding out what's happening in the market. Then I think probably most teams will not be starting projects. So as of now, right? So most teams will not be starting project with AI tools from the scratch, right? Because they already have some kind of project or some kind of legacy, test automation tools or approaches or QA processes. So they are in a situation where they want to some kind of integrate AI tool into something that's already there, into some kind of existing processes, existing approaches, right? And there are multiple ways of dealing with this. So you do not want to disturb what you already have. So if you have a good process, if you have, if this legacy test automation approach, like the code-red approach, works for you and it adds your value and it basically gets the job done, there's no need to just throw it all out, because you want to have this AI hype in your, I don't know, LinkedIn profile, right? This has to be done, with considerations of your context. You can start by basically, assessing what the AI tools market has at this point, and what problems do you want to solve. Because I think this has to be tied to specific problems that you want to solve, right? Because
yes.
So my experience is, especially this is true for tech people, they want to get their hands dirty in new technologies. So it's not always that they consider the business side of it, or the long-term advantages it's going to have. It's just, okay, I know some programming stack. I know this tool. Oh, there's a new tool. I want to try this just because I'm really curious, right? But if you think on a larger scale, you have to think about all the advantages and disadvantages. So you have to consider in what, like maybe doing some pilot project, or migrating, some small portion of your project or your test automation activities into some AI platform, right? And see how that goes. One thing that's helpful is some AI tools have these importing capabilities, so they can basically import your, let's say, Selenium scripts into their system. So that can help to some extent. But again, it's really hard to find a project that's using. Well, I hope so. It's really hard to find a project that's using raw Selenium, right? So there's different layers of abstraction, and this process of importing can be really tricky, but still you can do it, right? And you can see, you can migrate some parts of your project and see what's happening. If you're really getting the value, if you're really getting more efficient, if you get all those advantages that come with using AI tools, right? And so this requires for you to update and modify your strategy, your QA strategy and test automation strategy. And when those pilot projects will show some good results, you can move, gradually converting everything into AI, right? I guess my main point is there's no need to do it like blindly, right? You need to understand your context, you need to understand your challenges, you need to know where you want to go, where you want to end up with what you want to end up with. And based on that, you can build a strategy that will help you to incorporate the AI, right? And if we're talking about strategy, it's not only on technical level, because we have also the business side. So this is the question of of resources spent on the AI tool, because, well, most of them are not free, right? You should purchase a license or do some kind of this related stuff to this. So multiple things to consider this. One other thing is what we've seen from assessing multiple tools on the market is a lot of those tools, they focus mainly on front-end automation, which is, I find that this is really interesting, because we have this approach where, there are different levels of testing, and the front-end level should be not the biggest one, right? So you should have more coverage on the integration level and on the unit level and so on, right? And I would want to see in AI tools the focus shifted to the backend testing as well, because right now most of the tools, they kind of force you to do more front-end testing, right? And that is the situation that we want to get from, because a lot of projects, they have this issue. They don't have this valid test automation pyramid or quality pyramid, and they have a lot of UI testing and a lot of maintenance, a lot of issues, and so on. So I think focusing on the right balance and on the balanced approach is also a key thing here. So so you can get most of your involvement with an AI platform or AI tool. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so many interesting points there. Where to start? I think, as I say, at a high level, I think it's again bringing us back to that same position where effectively you need to plan with regards to how you are going to work with any AQA partner from a tool perspective. It's fundamental that effectively the CIO and the CTO are engaging, and they are effectively defining the strategies as to how it will work to integrate the software, which is the CTO's responsibility, and how it will work with the users, which is the CIO's responsibility, to ensure that that wrappers and that there's a process and everything is seamless as part of the project when it's engaged. Your point on using a pilot is an excellent one. We haven't touched on that yet, but again, suck it before, as say, you to effectively try something out to ensure that it's going to work for you is a logical based approach to effectively say, okay, let's try it on this small piece of work and say, and see, then we can expand that across each of the corresponding areas, each project slowly, and then we can fine tune the process, which again helps, again, from a techie perspective and from a business-based perspective to streamline the process. If you just throw it all in, then potentially you have a broken base set of process that you've got to build back up again for everything. So it's a very good suggestion to our listeners here about utilizing it as a pilot. It's a very, very good suggestion. One other point you picked up on with regards to the different testing levels. Historically, there have always been, again, stick my PM-based hat on, the three types of testing, which is your front end, your middleware, and your back end from a database perspective. And I think you're right. A lot of the tools that we have seen very much been focused front end based, and they are saying that inherently, okay, you're testing the API as an integration part, as part of the corresponding process. Well, that's maybe, but predominantly you're doing 80–90% of that front end and kind of a small part of the back end by the API integration. You're not really pushing that API hard. So I agree with you. From my perspective, I would like to see more on that. And then, okay, just because the screen shows a corresponding value, that doesn't mean to say what it is in the database. Yeah. So again, it's rounding that off a little bit more for full-on true coverage. Doesn't have to be 100% historical based, but effectively giving that better coverage on the three different historical based levels. It may be that front end is more stacked, i.e. it has to be 60%, maybe 20–30% for the middleware and 10% for the back end. So I'm a stats man. That effectively you cover off that with corresponding tools. But I think to negate that from some of the tools is missing something of what historical testers has done. Yeah. James, what are your thoughts on this as to, where that's going?
Yeah, no, this is fantastic conversation. And I mean, there are so many points here. I mean, number one, if we talk about that sort of pilot approach, it goes again right back to that very first point of, there's a tendency sometimes for people to go, let's just jump in and try stuff. Let's jump to find a tool, can have a go. And it's like, this isn't sort of a playground. It is, if you're missing that sort of business objective or the understanding that, particularly as you get to AI inherently does come with a cost. I mean, quite simply, you have to pay to utilize if you're using things like OpenAI. Therefore, it is going to have a cost in some form to the organization. But so therefore, if you're investing something, if you're investing your time, if you're investing, there's a commercial value, but also if you're thinking, why are you doing this? It's not for fun. It's to try and gain some sort of benefit. Correct. Setting those parameters first before going and saying, then, right, now that helps me to even scope out what it is I'm looking for. I mean, I do think there are explorations people can be doing to familiarize themselves with AI. Mm-hmm. For example, use ChatGPT as an assistant.
Yes.
Notwithstanding, you've got to consider your data governance and privacy and things like that. Use it for interpretation. If I don't quite understand what a workflow is, but I have some documents, maybe ChatGPT can help me. Use it for a suggestion. How might I build a test plan if I've never built one before? What am I missing from my test plan? Can you give me some suggestions? There's actually some really great practical things you can do that are just sort of helping with sort of thought processes. So and what that helps with then in large language model world is learn prompt engineering. That's actually, because to the point, Harris, you made about, can I convert a Selenium test into, let's say for us, I've played around with putting in a Selenium test and asking it to convert it into our natural language, I learned a lot about prompt engineering and managed to get it to work to a large degree through prompt engineering. So I think, yeah, there's at the moment, but one more point as well is this technology is not polished. This technology is not perfect. It is evolving. We see the number of, just talk about ChatGPT, the number of models that are being released, the frequencies, like every month. So I think you've got to sort of wear it with a slight sort of caveat that don't expect it to be perfect, expect it to be wrong. Therefore, you've got to be judicious and treat this as an exploration, but start to figure out how can this help us? And that feeds back into that whole discussion of what problems do we have, what can we solve, and what is there out there that could be potential, or actually we might need to hold off for 6 months on this because that's where we anticipate this might come. Yeah.
Okay. Just to extend, on one of the points there about conversion of existing base scripts. It may be worthwhile for a business to consider. I'm sticking business-based hats on this one. Play different roles to effectively for a CTO to consider. Okay, we have a solution for this particular project. It already works, and this is a point James made earlier on. We're not going to touch that. We're just going to leave it as it is. Yeah, it works out of the box. We're going to keep it there. Everything else we will consider utilizing a new tool for. Again, don't, as I say, utilize a tool just blindly to effectively go and do everything for it. Consider where it adds the value, yeah, and utilize it in the best way possible, and then have exceptions. Exceptions are fine to rules to effectively for what your business needs the most. So it's worthwhile CTOs and CIOs considering that as part of that when they're engaging with AQA Tools providers. Okay. Okay, guys, we've touched on lots of different topic matters there. Okay, are there any other points that, as I say, we would like to share with our audience? Well aware that obviously we're running close on time-wise. James, anything more from your side that you would like to elaborate on at all?
I think it's just to say that it's to have an openness, and I think naturally with all this, people are going to fear that is this coming in, and what's it going to do to my role? Is this going to impact me? And that's the big question, sort of everyone's asking: is what does the future hold? I mean, what I would say is embrace things, because I mean, certainly for us as a platform provider, I will always go in and I will tell people if I think we're the wrong platform for them. I will tell them if I think what they're doing is actually pretty good. I will tell them if there's a tandem approach where, like you say, use the existing for now and maybe for another project use the other. And so I think it's actually the fact that you can have conversations with people, you can have conversations with providers, and any provider that won't have a conversation, maybe you've got to think, actually, should I be talking to them? But be open, because our roles are going to change, all of ours, and it's more likely to be our role will change rather than it no longer being there. And so actually that embracing the fact that things are evolving and changing, I think is that culture of testing. I think we're seeing it a lot now. I think people are realizing that. But don't treat your, there's a tendency, sort of the testing world has largely been open source. And now you get sort of commercial providers, as a lot of platforms are, just because there's a salesperson there or just because it's commercial. Actually, a lot of people in testing are very good people, even those who are working on the behalf of the providers, and you can have good conversations with people because this isn't like buying a car. I don't walk in and just pick it up. There will be a process, there will be a pilot, there will be validations. So don't be afraid of having that sort of just that first exploration and discussions. Yeah.
And I think AI is obviously definitely here to stay. Yeah, it's going to, as they have an impact on people's lives. And as such, as people should embrace it. Yeah, it's not going away. Yeah, so effectively work with it rather than against it. Yeah, and utilize it for the benefits that it can actually provide for people and organizations. Yeah, Taras, any additional thoughts from your side before we wrap up?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you guys said. So AI is not going to steal our job if you will not ignore it, right? So don't ignore AI. So you definitely, as a quality engineer, as an automation engineer, there's a benefit and a value in getting acquainted with this technology and how you can use it, right? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. We have an additional question come through. Question to James. Our manual testers are in fear that AI will replace them in their near future. Do you think this is realistic? Yeah.
Actually, I say quite the opposite. In fact,
yes.
If you think about it, manual testers, and we won't get into that term, functional testers or whatever you want to call them. If we talk about people who maybe don't participate today in automation because they might not be, coders, they might know JavaScript or Java. In actual fact, if you think, they're the people you can start saying, I can give automation to with AI, and that's the reality. And
yes.
maybe then my engineers, maybe I get them working. And so you might get the manual testers using the automation with AI for the UI front-end testing. My esthets, I get them working, to your point, Bruce, more towards the back end, the integrations in the back end with their engineering skills. I genuinely actually think the opposite is true. And given that nobody seems to have anywhere close to, even 50% coverage, unless they're testing something quite basic, you actually take your manual testers with AI and automation. Can they get your coverage for repeatable to like 80%? Technical stuff goes to the engineers. I think everyone becomes very happy with that proposition, Yeah. So no, I think quite the opposite.
I tend to agree with that statement from my side. Realistically, manual testers are more akin to effectively utilizing an AQA tool, which is front-end based. And as James said, effectively that then gives your AQA scripters the opportunity to more work on the back-end part for lower level coverage to, again, increase that collective coverage for management to have that sanity check again to ensure everything's there. So from my perspective, I completely agree with everything he just said. And to extend again upon that, AI technology is evolving. It's going to take years to kind of move on. As I say, we saw a big jump about 6 months ago. That is because effectively someone came along with a killer feature and extended the market and the efficiency with regards to the actual testing that can be done. Unless we see another spike like that, it's going to just inch up gradually. There is going to be lots of work coming, I say, for existing people. And again, embrace the technology that's there. Work with it to effectively evolve as an individual and within the corresponding organization and the market. Yeah. And effectively, you will have a role there ongoing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Another perspective here is I think same was happening with test automation, right? So when test automation as the industry started to evolve, you could hear the same thought. Okay, so test automation engineers are going to replace manual testing, and it was the same, right? So I started in IT with maybe like 10 or 11 years ago, and I've already have heard that there will be no manual testing in a year, right? And it's been like 11 years now, and we're still there. So it's not definitely going to happen. And it's what you guys said, definitely. This is going to change the landscape. It's going to change the approach and the mindset that we have. But I'm sure it's not going to eliminate, a lot of guys, a lot of roles and jobs, especially for manual and automated testing.
Okay, thank you for your question. Okay. For now, conscious that we are running out of time. As such, I would really like to thank our, key speakers here, James, Taras. Thank you very much for your time. Your insights into where we are in this very interesting topic. To our audience, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed what we were talking about. And we will come back with answers to additional questions, going forward as well. Thank you very much for your time, everybody, and have a great day. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.